My parents threatened to double my rent unless I was my sister's full-time free nanny. They didn't know I would vanish overnight, leaving them completely drowning in her mess. I am 25 years old, and if you had told me a year ago that I would be meticulously planning my escape from my childhood home like a fugitive in the night, I would have laughed in your face. I am a regular person. I work as an elementary school teacher, which means my days are chaotic, loud, and incredibly draining. I wake up every morning at 5:30, drink a cup of black coffee in absolute silence, and brace myself for a room full of 25 energetic 8-year-olds. I love my job. I really do. There is something incredibly rewarding about helping a kid finally understand a math problem they have been struggling with. But let us be brutally honest about the reality of the teaching profession. It is not exactly a path to instant wealth. You do not go into teaching for the money, and the paycheck reflects that harsh truth every single month. When I graduated from college, I took a hard look at my finances, my student loans, and the skyrocketing cost of apartments in my area. The math just did not make sense. I could barely afford a shoebox apartment with 3 roommates, and the idea of living paycheck to paycheck terrified me. So, I made the practical, logical choice. I moved back into my childhood home in the suburbs. It was not the glamorous post-college life you see in the movies, but it was a strategic move. My ultimate goal was to keep my head down, live as frugally as humanly possible, and save enough money for a down payment on a small house of my own within 2 years. But living at home did not mean I was getting a free ride. My parents made that very clear from day one. They are big believers in teaching responsibility, or at least, that is what they called it when it applied to me. They drafted a literal agreement. I pay $400 a month in rent. They called it a family discount, but I knew plenty of people living at home who paid nothing. On top of the rent, I buy every single one of my own groceries. I have a designated shelf in the fridge and a specific cabinet for my dry goods. I pay for my own car insurance, my own phone bill, and my own gas. Beyond the financial contributions, I am basically the unpaid maintenance worker for the house. When the lawn needs to be mowed in the sweltering heat of July, I am the one pushing the mower. When the kitchen sink backs up, I am the one under the counter with a wrench. Last summer, when my dad hurt his lower back, I spent 3 grueling weekends cleaning out the garage, hauling decades of accumulated junk to the local dump. I never complained. I viewed it as the cost of doing business. It was a temporary setup. I would pay my dues, hoard my savings, and eventually walk out the front door with my head held high and the keys to my own property in my hand. It was a simple, foolproof plan. I stayed out of their way, they respected my space, and the arrangement worked like a well-oiled machine. That is, until the machine was completely derailed. To understand how quickly everything fell apart, you have to understand the deeply rooted dynamics of my family. In the psychology world, there is a term called the glass child. It refers to the sibling who is healthy, capable, and self-sufficient, but who becomes practically invisible because the parents are entirely focused on the other child. I was the textbook definition of a glass child. But the twist in my family was that my older sister did not have a medical condition or a learning disability. Her only affliction was a chronic, overwhelming sense of entitlement. Her name is Bianca. She is 32 years old, 7 years older than me, and she has always been the undeniable golden child of the family. Growing up, the disparity in how we were treated was not just noticeable, it was blinding. I never truly understood if it was because she was the firstborn, or if my parents just possessed some blind, irrational soft spot for her, but in their eyes, Bianca could literally do no wrong. Let me paint a picture of this favoritism for you, because it is the foundation of everything that happened later. When Bianca turned 18 and graduated high school, my parents threw her a massive party. They invited 50 people, catered the food, and at the end of the night, they walked her out to the driveway and handed her the keys to a brand new, shiny red sedan. They said they wanted her to start her adult life on the right foot. Less than a month later, she totaled that car because she was texting her boyfriend while driving through a red light. Did she face any consequences? Absolutely not. My parents paid the insurance deductible, bought her a slightly cheaper used car, and my mom actually blamed the city for putting a traffic light in a confusing spot. Compare that to my 18th birthday. We had a quiet dinner. They got me a nice cake and a gift card to a bookstore. There was no car waiting in the driveway. I desperately needed a way to get to my part-time job, so I spent my entire summer scrubbing toilets and wiping down sticky tables at a local diner. I saved every penny of my minimum wage tips until I had enough to buy a rusted, second-hand blue bicycle from a guy on the internet. For 3 years, I rode that bike in the pouring rain and the blistering heat. If I got a B on a test, my parents would sit me down and lecture me about academic rigor and securing my future. If Bianca failed a class, which happened frequently, my parents would schedule a meeting to yell at the teacher for not accommodating her unique learning style. Every single time she messed up, they bailed her out. They paid her overdue rent when she inevitably quit her jobs. They covered her car repairs. They paid off her credit cards. Meanwhile, I was quietly taking out student loans and working double shifts to afford my textbooks. For years, I just accepted it. I swallowed the bitterness, telling myself that life is not fair and that their blatant favoritism was just building my character. I thought I had built a fortress around my emotions. I thought I was immune to their toxic dynamic as long as I stayed in my lane. I was incredibly wrong. The illusion of my peaceful, temporary living arrangement was shattered on a random Tuesday evening in late September. I had just finished grading a terrifyingly large stack of spelling tests and walked downstairs to get a glass of water. I stopped dead in my tracks in the hallway. Standing in the foyer, surrounded by 3 massive suitcases and looking like she had just survived a natural disaster, was Bianca. To say Bianca had a turbulent 20s would be an absolute understatement. She had dropped out of college not once, but twice. The first time, after 3 semesters, she claimed the campus environment was stifling her creative spirit. The second time, at a completely different university, she dropped out because the professors were too demanding and refused to give her extensions on assignments she simply forgot to do. She had spent the last 5 years bouncing between random apartments, burning through roommates, and never holding down a job for more than 4 or 5 months. Every single time she quit a job, she had a wild excuse. The manager was toxic, the commute was ruining her aura, the uniform was degrading. It was never her fault. For the past year, I thought she was finally standing on her own 2 feet in a city 2 hours away. I was foolishly optimistic. It turns out she had been constantly behind on rent and secretly leaning on my parents to keep her afloat the entire time. I did not know the extent of the financial drain until that Tuesday night. She stood there, dramatic tears rolling down her face, and casually dropped a nuclear bomb on the living room. She was pregnant. Now, I am not here to judge anyone for an unplanned pregnancy. Life happens. But knowing Bianca, this was a catastrophe waiting to unfold. The father was some guy she had been casually dating for roughly 3 months. According to her tearful recounting, when she showed him the positive test, he did not exactly step up to the plate. In fact, he practically vanished into thin air. He blocked her number, deleted his social media, and moved out of his apartment. You would think that a 32-year-old woman, suddenly faced with single motherhood and no income, would experience a massive wake-up call. You would think this would be the moment she realized she needed to drastically change her life, find a stable job, and prepare for a child. But this is Bianca. She did not look for a job. She ran straight back to the only safety net that had never failed her: our parents. And my parents? They went into immediate, frantic fix-it mode. There was no conversation about her responsibilities. There was no tough love. Within 48 hours, my dad was taking measurements of the basement. Within a week, they had hired contractors. They decided to completely renovate the dusty, unfinished basement to turn it into a luxury private apartment for her. They planned to install a full kitchenette, a modern bathroom, and premium flooring. I sat at the kitchen table, watching them sketch out blueprints, and I made the mistake of asking how they were paying for a $30,000 renovation on such short notice. My mother did not even look up from the catalog of baby cribs. She casually mentioned that they were dipping heavily into their retirement savings. My stomach plummeted. I tried to remind myself that it was their money and their terrible decision. But looking at Bianca, who was already lounging on the sofa demanding someone bring her a blanket, I felt a creeping, icy dread. I knew my parents. Whenever Bianca created a massive black hole of a problem, their gravitational pull eventually dragged everyone else into it. I could feel the pull starting. The complete destruction of my peace of mind began with the sound of power tools. The basement renovation started a week after Bianca arrived, and it turned the house into a literal war zone. The contractors arrived promptly at 6 in the morning every single day. I would be lying in bed, trying to mentally prepare for a day of teaching, only to be jolted awake by the deafening sound of concrete drills and hammering directly beneath my floorboards. Fine white drywall dust coated every single surface of the house. It was in the kitchen cabinets, it was on the living room television, and it was in the air we breathed. Because of the endless noise and the stress of inhaling construction debris, I was losing sleep at an alarming rate. I found myself drinking 4 cups of coffee before noon just to stay standing in my classroom. My patience with my students was wearing incredibly thin, and I had to fight to keep my professional composure. While I was out working 40 to 50 hours a week, Bianca was living what appeared to be an all-inclusive resort vacation. She declared that the stress of the construction was bad for the baby, so she spent her days locked in the master bedroom, which my parents gladly gave up for her while they slept on a pull-out couch. She would lie in their king-sized bed, watching reality television and scrolling through her phone. But she wasn't just scrolling. She was aggressively online shopping for expensive, designer maternity clothes and aesthetic nursery decor. All of this, of course, was being charged directly to my dad's credit card. The worst part was coming home. After surviving an exhausting day at school, the last thing I wanted to do was clean. But the construction crew always left a mess, and my parents were too tired from their own jobs to handle it. When I suggested that Bianca could at least run a vacuum over the hallway, my mother looked at me as if I had suggested sending her to a labor camp. "She is pregnant, Nora," my mother would scold, lowering her voice as if Bianca was a fragile piece of glass. "Her body is going through immense changes. The doctor says she needs to avoid strenuous activity. You are young and healthy. Sweeping up a little dust will not kill you." So, I bit my tongue. I grabbed the broom, I grabbed the vacuum, and I spent my evenings cleaning up the mess created for a sister who was perfectly capable of doing it herself. I wiped down the counters, I mopped the floors, and I listened to the muffled sounds of television shows playing from the room where Bianca was resting. I told myself to just survive the renovation. Once the basement was finished, she would move down there, she would be out of my sight, and our lives would separate again. I clung to that hope desperately, not realizing that the basement was not a separation line, but a permanent anchor tying her to the house. As the weeks dragged on, Bianca's sense of entitlement began to spill out of the master bedroom and infect the rest of the house. Even though she wasn't officially moved into the basement yet, she started marking her territory everywhere. She would leave her shoes scattered right in the middle of the living room floor. She would leave half-empty cups of iced tea on my favorite reading chair. She even started bypassing the downstairs bathroom and coming upstairs to use mine, leaving her expensive shampoos cluttering my shower and wet towels thrown on the floor. But the absolute breaking point regarding my physical boundaries happened over food. Because I was on a strict budget, trying to save every dollar for my future house, I was meticulous about my meals. Every Sunday afternoon, I dedicated 3 hours to meal prepping. I would bake chicken breasts, roast vegetables, and portion everything out into glass containers so I would have healthy lunches and dinners ready for the entire week. It saved me a ton of money and time. One Wednesday evening, I came home absolutely starved. We had parent-teacher conferences that day, so I had been at the school for 11 straight hours. All I could think about on the drive home was the container of garlic butter salmon and asparagus waiting for me on my designated shelf in the fridge. I walked into the kitchen, dropped my heavy work bag, and opened the refrigerator door. My shelf was empty. The salmon was gone. The asparagus was gone. In fact, a brand new loaf of expensive artisan bread I had bought was half eaten, and my premium Greek yogurt was nowhere to be found. I closed the fridge door, feeling a hot wave of anger rising in my chest. I walked into the living room. Bianca was lounging on the sofa, a bowl of my Greek yogurt resting on her stomach, happily eating it while watching a cooking show. "Did you eat my prepared meals?" I asked, my voice tight. Bianca did not even flinch. She took another bite of my yogurt, kept her eyes glued to the television screen, and casually mumbled, "Mom said I could have some." I was craving fish. I stepped closer to the sofa. "Mom did not pay for that fish. I paid for it. I spent hours cooking it so I would have food after working all day. You have no right to just take my things." Finally, she turned to look at me, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Relax, Nora. It is just food. Do not be such a massive drama queen. You act like I stole your car." Before I could respond, my mother bustled into the living room, carrying a stack of folded laundry that belonged to Bianca. She immediately inserted herself into the argument, entirely taking Bianca's side. "Nora, lower your voice," my mother hissed. "Your sister is eating for two right now. Her cravings are unpredictable. You make a salary. You can easily go to the drive-thru and grab a burger. Stop making her feel unwelcome in her own home." I stood there, staring at the two of them. "I pay rent here," I said, my voice shaking with restrained fury. "I buy my own food. This is not about sharing. This is about basic respect. This is a family home," my mother snapped back, slamming the laundry basket onto a chair. "We share in this family. You need to learn how to be a supportive sister instead of hoarding your little groceries like a miser." I turned around and walked out of the room without another word. I ended up eating a bowl of plain cereal for dinner that night. Sitting in my room, listening to them laughing downstairs, a terrifying realization washed over me. It was not just about the salmon or the yogurt. It was the undeniable proof that in this house, my boundaries meant absolutely nothing. My property was their property, and my hard work was just a resource for them to distribute to Bianca whenever she felt like taking it. After the grocery incident, the atmosphere in the house fundamentally shifted. The passive aggressiveness from my parents reached an entirely new level. They stopped treating me like a tenant and a daughter, and started treating me like a disappointing employee who was failing to meet their job requirements. It started with small, loaded comments. Whenever I would grab my keys to head out to the gym or meet a friend for coffee on a Saturday, my dad would sit in his recliner, lower his newspaper, and say something like, "It must be really nice to have so much free time. Some people in this house are actually dealing with real responsibilities." I would ignore him and walk out the door, but the words still stung. My mother took a different approach. She became the master of the subtle guilt trip. She would constantly sigh loudly in the kitchen, rubbing her temples and complaining about how exhausted she was from helping Bianca organize the baby clothes. She would look directly at me and say, "It takes a village to raise a child, Nora. A whole village. I just pray our family is strong enough to step up when the time comes." I knew exactly what they were doing. They were laying the psychological groundwork. They were trying to manipulate me into feeling so guilty about my independent life that I would willingly offer to help. But I held my ground. I kept my answers short, I stayed in my room as much as possible, and I focused entirely on my students and my savings account. But then I overheard the conversation that confirmed my absolute worst fears. It was late on a Friday night. I had fallen asleep early but woke up around 1 in the morning feeling incredibly thirsty. I quietly opened my bedroom door and padded halfway down the carpeted stairs to head to the kitchen. The house was completely dark, except for a dim yellow light spilling out from the kitchen doorway. I could hear my parents whispering. I stopped on the stairs, holding my breath, hidden in the shadows. "I am just saying, we cannot keep this pace up," my mother was whispering, her voice tight with stress. "The baby is due in 4 months. The renovations cost way more than the estimate. I cannot retire early to be a full-time babysitter, and Bianca clearly has no intention of finding a daycare. We are going to drown." There was a pause, followed by the sound of my dad stirring a mug of tea. "We won't drown," he replied, his voice calm and entirely confident. "We have Nora. I felt my heart skip a beat. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear every word. Nora is being incredibly stubborn, my mother countered. Did you see how she reacted over a piece of fish? She is not going to just volunteer to help. She won't have a choice, my dad said bluntly. Think about it. She is a teacher. She gets off work by 3:30 every afternoon. She has summers completely off. Her schedule is absolutely perfect. It is built-in free childcare. We will just tell her that covering the afternoons is part of her rent agreement now. Where else is she going to go? She cannot afford an apartment around here on her salary. She is trapped. She will complain, but she will do it. We are a family. She has to pitch in. I did not go to the kitchen to get water. I turned around, tiptoed back up the stairs, and quietly closed my bedroom door. I locked it. I sat on the edge of my bed in the pitch-black room, my mind racing a million miles an hour. They were not just favoring Bianca. They had orchestrated an entire plan to sacrifice my life to make hers easier. They looked at my hard-earned career, my carefully managed schedule, and my limited income, and they saw nothing but a convenient tool to fix Bianca's mess. My own father had just admitted he believed I was financially trapped and could be forced into unpaid labor. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The sadness and the bitterness evaporated, replaced by a sharp, burning anger. They thought I was trapped. They thought they had backed me into a corner where I had no choice but to surrender my freedom. I opened my laptop, the screen illuminating my face in the dark room. I pulled up my financial spreadsheets. I was going to prove them incredibly, devastatingly wrong. If you are enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you are living in. Every single comment helps this video reach more people. Thank you so much. The tension in the house finally boiled over a few days later. It was a Sunday evening, and my dad had made his famous spaghetti and meatballs. In my family, spaghetti was never just a meal. It was the official food of family meetings, bad news, and serious discussions. Whenever I smelled garlic and simmering tomato sauce drifting up the stairs, I knew someone was about to get a lecture. Usually, it was Bianca getting a gentle talking to about overdrawing her checking account again. But this time, as I walked into the dining room and took my seat, I could feel a heavy, suffocating atmosphere that was directed entirely at me. My parents were acting overly casual, discussing the neighbors and the weather with a forced cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. Bianca was sitting across from me, not engaging in the conversation at all. She was twirling pasta around her fork with one hand and aggressively scrolling through her phone with the other, occasionally letting out a soft chuckle at whatever she was reading. We ate in relative silence for about 15 minutes before my mother finally cleared her throat. She set her fork down and folded her hands on the table, giving my dad a meaningful look. "So, Nora," my mother started, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that instantly put me on edge. "Your dad and I have been looking at the schedule for when the baby arrives. We want to make sure Bianca has all the support she needs during her postpartum recovery." I chewed my food slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on my plate. "Okay," I said neutrally. My dad jumped in, leaning forward on his elbows. "Since the renovations are eating up a lot of our spare cash, hiring a professional nanny or paying for a daycare center is completely out of the question right now. Plus, we want the baby to be raised by family, not strangers." I looked up at him. "And?" "Well," my dad continued, his tone shifting into the authoritative voice he used when giving orders. "We looked at your work schedule. You are out of the school building by 3 o'clock every single day. You have weekends completely free, and you get 2 whole months off during the summer. It is honestly the perfect setup." I froze. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I looked at my mother, then at my dad, and finally at Bianca, who had not even bothered to look up from her screen. "Are you asking me to babysit sometimes?" I asked, genuinely hoping I was misinterpreting their words. "Oh no," my mother said quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "Not just sometimes. We need a solid routine. We expect you to take over the primary childcare duties every weekday from 3:30 in the afternoon until we get home from work around 6:30. And obviously, you will need to help out on the weekends so Bianca can rest. I stared at them in absolute disbelief. You want me to come home from teaching a classroom full of children all day and immediately take care of a newborn infant for 3 hours every single evening? For free? You make it sound like a punishment, my dad snapped, his friendly facade instantly dropping. It is your niece or nephew. You should want to spend time with them. You live under our roof, Nora. You use our electricity, our water, and our internet. It is time you started pulling your weight around here instead of just treating this house like a cheap hotel. Pulling my weight? I repeated, my voice rising. I pay you $400 every single month. I buy all my own groceries. I clean the gutters, I mow the lawn, and I scrub the floors. I have never once asked you for a handout. Bianca finally locked her phone and looked at me, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. Wow, Nora. I did not realize being asked to help your own flesh and blood was such a massive burden. You were being incredibly selfish. I felt my hands ball into fists under the table. The sheer audacity of her calling me selfish was enough to make me see red. I looked directly at my parents. I am not doing it. I have a full-time career. I am tired when I get home. I am not raising Bianca's child because she refuses to take responsibility for her own life. The dining room went completely silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My father's face turned a deep shade of red. He threw his napkin onto the table and pointed a finger directly at me. You do not get to dictate the terms of living in my house, he growled. We are a family. We operate as a unit. If one person is struggling, everyone else steps up to carry the load. That is how this works. Except the only person who ever struggles is Bianca, I shot back, abandoning any attempt to keep the peace. And the only people carrying the load are you two, and now you want to strap it onto my back. Well, I refuse. She is 32 years old. It is time she figured her own life out. Do not speak about your sister that way. My mother yelled, tears immediately springing to her eyes. She always used tears as a weapon when she was losing an argument. She is vulnerable right now. The father abandoned her. She is scared and alone, and you are sitting there judging her from your high horse just because you have a steady job. I am not judging her, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. I am protecting myself. I am not a built-in nanny. My answer is no. My father stood up from the table, towering over me. His expression was cold and calculating. Fine, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If you want to act like a completely independent tenant who has no obligations to this family, then we are going to treat you like one. The family discount on your room is officially over. I narrowed my eyes. What does that mean? It means your rent is going up, he stated flatly. Starting on the 1st of next month, you will pay $800 a month to live here. No exceptions. My jaw dropped. You are doubling my rent? Just like that? My mother sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We have to, Nora. With a new baby coming and the cost of the basement, our expenses are through the roof. If you are not willing to contribute your time and energy to help this family survive, then you have to contribute financially. It is only fair. It is extortion, I said, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. You are literally trying to fine me for refusing to be unpaid labor. You are using my money to fund her mistakes. If you do not like the new rules, you know exactly where the front door is, my father said, crossing his arms over his chest. But let us be realistic, Nora. You cannot afford an apartment in this zip code on a teacher's salary. You need us just as much as we need you to help with this baby. Pay the $800, or do the right thing and help your sister. It is your choice. I looked at the three of them. My father looked triumphant, convinced he had trapped me. My mother looked entirely justified in her manipulation. And Bianca just looked bored, having already picked up her phone again. I did not say another word. I turned around, walked out of the dining room, and marched straight up the stairs. I walked into my bedroom and locked the door behind me with a loud, definitive click. I did not turn on the main overhead light. I just walked over to my small wooden desk, clicked on the small reading lamp, and opened my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in my password. My father's words echoed relentlessly in my head. He honestly believed he had me completely cornered. He thought I was financially chained to that house and that I would eventually break down, accept the $800 rent, and inevitably be forced into changing diapers and warming bottles every afternoon just to survive. I opened my budgeting spreadsheet. The screen glowed brightly in the dark room, displaying neat rows of my income, my savings, and my monthly expenses. I took a deep, shaky breath and forced my panic aside. I needed to look at this logically, not emotionally. My take-home pay as a junior teacher was not great, but I had been incredibly disciplined for the last 2 years. I had a solid emergency fund sitting in a high-yield savings account. I looked at the new demand. $800 a month. Plus my own groceries. Plus my car insurance. Plus the undeniable emotional toll of living in a house where I was viewed as a servant. If I stayed and paid the increased rent, I would be miserable, and I would be directly funding Bianca's lifestyle. If I stayed and caved to the babysitting demand, my mental health would completely collapse. I picked up my phone and opened my text messages. I scrolled down until I found the contact for Carmen, the second-grade teacher whose classroom was right next to mine. 2 weeks ago, during our lunch break in the staff room, Carmen had casually mentioned that her roommate was moving across the country for a new job, and she was desperately looking for someone to take over the second bedroom in her apartment. I had politely listened, but had not considered it at the time, completely focused on my plan to buy a house. I stared at the blinking cursor in the message box. "Hey Carmen," I typed, my thumbs moving quickly. "I know this is super last minute, but are you still looking for a roommate to fill that second bedroom?" I hit send and stared at the ceiling, waiting. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. "Yes," Carmen replied. "I am practically begging people. It is available on the 1st of the month. Are you interested?" I sat up straight. "How much is the total rent for the place?" I texted back. "It is $1,600 total," she answered. "So it would be $800 each, plus we split the electric and internet right down the middle. Water and trash are included." I stared at the number. $800. It was the exact same amount my father had just aggressively demanded from me to stay in a tiny childhood bedroom while being treated like garbage. For the exact same price, I could live in a quiet, drama-free apartment with a respectful professional, 15 minutes closer to my school, and completely sever the toxic ties to my family. The math was suddenly very, very simple. "I am in," I typed. "I will take it. Can we sign the paperwork this week?" Carmen sent back a string of celebratory emojis. "Absolutely. Let us grab coffee before the morning bell tomorrow and sort out the details." I locked my phone and set it down on the desk. A strange, profound sense of calm washed over me. The shaking in my hands stopped entirely. My father thought he was a brilliant tactician, using money to force me into submission. He had no idea he had just handed me the exact motivation I needed to accelerate my timeline. I closed my laptop, walked over to my closet, and pulled out a large cardboard box from the top shelf. The trap was sprung, but they had not caught me. I was already gone. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in extreme psychological endurance. I had to play the role of the defeated, reluctant daughter perfectly. At the breakfast table, I kept my eyes down. When my dad brought up the new rent agreement, I just offered a vague nod and mumbled that I would have the money on the 1st of the month. My mother took my silence as submission and immediately started leaving catalogs for baby strollers on my placemat, assuming I was slowly accepting my new reality. Bianca continued to treat the house like her personal kingdom, leaving her messes everywhere and demanding everyone cater to her cravings. But behind the locked door of my bedroom, a highly organized, covert operation was taking place. I knew that if I told them I was moving out, all hell would break loose. They would scream, they would cry, and they would try every manipulation tactic in the book to keep me there. Worse, I knew exactly how petty Bianca could be. If she knew I was leaving, she would absolutely try to claim my belongings as her own or intentionally damage my things out of spite. I could not risk an explosive confrontation while all my valuables were still in the house. So, I packed in absolute secrecy. Every day after work, I would bring home a few heavy-duty black garbage bags hidden inside my large canvas teacher tote. Late at night, while the rest of the house was fast asleep, I would carefully fold my winter clothes, my extra shoes, and my books, packing them tightly into the bags. I stuffed the bags deep under my bed and shoved them into the darkest corners of my closet, out of sight. Every morning, when I left for school at 6, I would casually carry one or two of those heavy bags out the front door, making it look like I was just taking out the regular trash or bringing materials to my classroom. Instead, I was loading my car. My trunk became a mobile storage unit. But packing my clothes was not enough. I had lived with Bianca's sticky fingers for my entire life. I knew her patterns. I pulled out my phone and began documenting everything. I took clear, well-lit photographs of every single corner of my bedroom. I opened my drawers and recorded videos of my remaining belongings. I flipped over my expensive laptop, my secondary monitor, and my tablet, taking high-resolution photos of the serial numbers and the manufacturer tags. I dug through my email archives and saved the digital receipts for my electronics into a secure cloud folder. I was building an airtight case. I was not just moving out. I was ensuring they could never accuse me of stealing, and they could never successfully steal from me. By the last weekend of the month, my room looked perfectly normal at a quick glance, but all the drawers were empty, the closet was bare, and everything that truly mattered was either in my car or already dropped off at Carmen's apartment. I was completely ready. The night before the first of the month, I did not sleep a single wink. I lay on my bare mattress, fully dressed in jeans and a dark sweater, watching the glowing red numbers on my digital alarm clock slowly tick forward. At 4 in the morning, I quietly slipped out of bed. I zipped up my small duffel bag containing my toothbrush, my phone charger, and the clothes I was going to wear to work that day. It was the only piece of luggage I had left in the room. I walked over to my desk and picked up a crisp white envelope. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $400. Even though my dad had threatened to raise the rent to $800 starting today, my original agreement was for $400. I was paying my final month to fulfill any legal definition of a 30-day notice, completely covering my tracks so they could never claim I broke a financial commitment or left them high and dry. Folded neatly alongside the check was a typed, highly formal letter. It was exactly 3 sentences long. It stated that I was officially terminating my living arrangement, that my final rent payment was enclosed, and that I would no longer be residing at the property effective immediately. I did not include a forwarding address. I did not include an emotional explanation. It was a cold, professional business transaction. I opened my bedroom door. The house was completely silent, wrapped in the heavy stillness of the early morning. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I walked softly down the carpeted hallway until I reached my parents' bedroom door. I knelt on the floor, took a deep breath, and slid the white envelope underneath the crack of the door. I stood up, gripping the strap of my duffel bag tightly, and walked down the stairs for the very last time. I did not look back at the walls holding my childhood memories. I did not feel a pang of sadness. All I felt was an overwhelming, powerful surge of adrenaline. I unlocked the front door, stepped out into the crisp, cool morning air, and locked the door behind me, dropping my spare key directly into the mailbox. I walked over to my car, tossed my duffel bag onto the passenger seat, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the morning fog as I backed out of the driveway. As I drove down the suburban street, watching my parents' house fade away in the rearview mirror, a massive, crushing weight lifted off my chest. I was free. I had completely vanished. I arrived at Carmen's apartment just as the sun was starting to rise. She was already awake, brewing a fresh pot of coffee in our bright, quiet kitchen. She poured me a mug, clinked it against hers, and smiled. "Welcome home, Nora," she said. We sat at the kitchen island, chatting about our lesson plans for the day, enjoying the peaceful environment. It was exactly what I had been craving for months. Normalcy. Calm. Respect. But the peace lasted exactly 2 hours. At 7:15 in the morning, my phone, which was sitting on the counter, vibrated violently. Then it buzzed again. And again. Suddenly, the screen was completely flooded with notifications. It looked like a digital slot machine paying out a jackpot of absolute chaos. My parents had clearly woken up and found the envelope. I watched the screen light up with missed calls from my dad, followed immediately by 3 frantic voicemails. I took a sip of my coffee and tapped play on the first one. "Nora, what is the meaning of this?" My dad's voice roared through the small speaker. "Where are your things? You cannot just leave in the middle of the night like a coward. Call me back right this second. We are a family, you cannot do this." The next voicemail was from my mother. It was entirely composed of hysterical sobbing. "How could you abandon your pregnant sister?" She wailed into the phone. "She is crying down here. The baby is going to be born into a broken family because of your selfishness. Please, Nora, come home. We can talk about the rent." I deleted both voicemails. Then came the text messages from the extended family. My mother had clearly gone straight to Facebook and sounded the alarm. A text from my Aunt Sylvia popped up. "I am absolutely disgusted with you, Nora. Walking out on your family when they need you the most. You always were a cold-hearted girl." I opened social media. Right at the top of my feed was a post from Bianca. She had uploaded a black and white photo of herself holding her baby bump, looking tragically out a window. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. It read, "Some people will smile in your face and then abandon you in your darkest hour just to save a few dollars. Blood does not mean loyalty. So grateful for my amazing parents who are the only ones holding me together right now." It had dozens of comments from distant relatives and her random internet friends calling me a monster. Carmen walked up behind me and looked over my shoulder at the screen. "Wow," she said softly. "That is intensely toxic." I nodded, feeling incredibly validated by her reaction. "It is. But it is not my problem anymore." I did not type out an angry response. I did not try to defend myself in the comments. I just systematically went through my phone. I blocked my father. I blocked my mother. I blocked Bianca. I blocked Aunt Sylvia. I blocked every single relative who sent me a hateful message. I erased their digital access to my life with the exact same precision I had used to pack my boxes. I set my phone face down on the counter, grabbed my teacher tote, and headed out the door to go to work. For 2 glorious weeks, my life was beautifully boring. I taught my classes, I came home to a clean apartment, I paid my exact half of the bills, and I slept a solid 8 hours every single night. The silence from my blocked family members was the greatest gift I had ever given myself. But life is never quite that simple. During the 3rd week of the month, the school district required all teachers to submit their updated physical teaching certification documents for a routine audit. I opened my filing cabinet in my new bedroom and realized my heart was sinking. In my rushing and sneaking around in the dark, I had completely forgotten to pack the small, locked fireproof box that held my birth certificate, my social security card, and my teaching credentials. I had left it tucked away in the very back of the bottom drawer of my old desk. I had no choice. I had to go back. I told Carmen about the situation during recess. "I am not going alone," I told her. "I need witnesses." "I will drive," Carmen said immediately. "And I am bringing Valerie from the science department. She takes zero nonsense from anybody." The next afternoon at 4 o'clock, Carmen parked her car right in my parents' driveway. Valerie, a tall woman with an incredibly intimidating stare, stepped out of the back seat. We walked up to the front door, and I used the spare key my parents kept hidden under a fake rock in the garden, since I had thrown my actual key away. I pushed the door open. The house smelled strongly of stale takeout food and dirty laundry. We walked straight up the stairs. My heart was pounding, but having Carmen and Valerie flanking me gave me the courage I needed. I pushed open the door to my old bedroom, and my jaw dropped. The room was completely unrecognizable. In just 2 weeks, Bianca had turned my meticulously clean space into an absolute disaster zone. Half-open cardboard boxes were scattered everywhere. Mountains of dirty maternity clothes were piled on my bed. But what made my blood boil was seeing my desk. Bianca had moved her makeup and her hair tools onto it. Sitting right in the center of the desk was my expensive secondary computer monitor, which I had purposefully left behind because it was too bulky to sneak out, intending to just buy a new one eventually. What the hell is going on here? I said loudly. The bathroom door across the hall opened, and Bianca stepped out. She was wearing one of my favorite oversized college sweatshirts that I had left in the laundry basket. She froze when she saw the three of us standing there. "Oh, look who decided to show her face," Bianca sneered, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here, Nora?" "This is my storage room now." "I am here to get my documents," I said, walking straight toward the desk. "And apparently, to retrieve my clothes that you are currently wearing." I pulled open the bottom drawer. Thank God, the fireproof box was still there, buried under a pile of her magazines. I grabbed it and tucked it under my arm. Then I reached over and unplugged the computer monitor. "Hey!" Bianca shouted, stepping forward. "Put that down. That is mine. Mom gave it to me for the baby's nursery. I am going to hook up a camera to it." I turned around and stared at her. "This is a $300 high-definition monitor that I bought with my own money. You are not keeping it." Before Bianca could yell again, I heard heavy footsteps charging up the stairs. My father and mother appeared in the doorway, their faces red with fury. "How dare you break into this house?" my dad bellowed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Put that monitor down right now. You forfeited your belongings when you abandoned this family. That belongs to Bianca now." My mother chimed in from behind him. "You owe us, Nora. You owe us for the stress you caused. Leave the electronics and get out." I did not yell. I did not cry. I calmly reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened my secure photo album. I held the screen up so my father could see it clearly. "I have a digital record of every single item I own," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "I have the purchase receipt for this monitor, dated 2 years ago, in my name. I have a high-resolution photograph of the serial number on the back of this exact screen." My dad stopped yelling. He stared at the glowing phone screen, his mouth slightly open. "If you try to stop me from walking out that door with my property," I continued, looking him dead in the eye, "I will dial 911 right now. I will show the police the receipts, and I will press formal theft charges against Bianca, and I will press charges against both of you for aiding in the theft. Do you really want the police showing up at your house while you are hiding an unpermitted, illegal basement renovation from the city inspectors?" The silence that followed was absolute. The color completely drained from my father's face. He knew I had him cornered. Valerie took a step forward, crossing her arms and glaring at my dad, ready for a fight. Carmen stepped up beside me. "Move," I said softly. My father slowly lowered his arm. He took a step back, pulling my mother with him, clearing the doorway. Bianca stood frozen, clutching my stolen sweatshirt. I walked out of the room, carrying my locked box and my monitor. I walked down the stairs, out the front door, and got into Carmen's car. I did not look back. That was 6 months ago. The dust has completely settled, and the reality of the choices my family made has finally caught up with them. I am thriving. Living with Carmen is fantastic. We respect each other's space. The apartment is peaceful, and I have actually managed to save more money in the last 6 months than I did in an entire year living at my parents' house. My mental health has improved dramatically, and I finally feel like a respected adult. As for my family, I get the occasional update from a younger cousin who understands exactly why I left and refuses to participate in the family drama. The updates are exactly what you would expect. Bianca had the baby. A little boy. And just as I predicted, motherhood did not magically transform her into a responsible adult. She still refuses to get a job. She claims she has severe anxiety and cannot possibly handle the stress of working while being a mother. So, she spends her days living in the luxury basement, making aesthetic social media posts about the struggles of single parenting, while doing absolutely none of the actual parenting. The entire burden of raising that child has fallen directly onto my parents' shoulders. My parents, who are in their late 60s and were looking forward to a quiet retirement, are now working full-time jobs and coming home to raise an infant. My cousin told me my mother looks like she has aged 10 years. She is constantly exhausted, crying from the stress of night feedings and buying expensive formula. My dad had to take on extra overtime shifts at his job just to keep up with the credit card debt from the basement renovation and the constant financial demands Bianca puts on them. They got exactly what they wanted. They got to keep their golden child under their roof, and they are drowning in the mess she created. About 2 months ago, I checked my spam email folder. Buried in the junk mail was a long, rambling message from my mother. It did not contain an apology. It did not contain any self-reflection. It was just a desperate plea. She begged me to come over on the weekends. She said the baby needed his aunt, and that family should forgive each other. She subtly mentioned that if I came back, they would not even charge me rent anymore. They finally realized the value of my free labor, but only after they had completely destroyed our relationship trying to steal it. I did not reply. I highlighted the email, clicked delete, and emptied the trash bin. I made a cup of tea, sat on my quiet balcony, and watched the sunset over the city. So, looking back at how I vanished overnight and left them to drown in the exact mess they created, am I the jerk for refusing to ever look back? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button, turn on notifications, and share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.